All right, good evening and welcome to today's broadcast. Of course, my name is Twitwi Ayenowowon. Let me sincerely apologize for the delay. I've just been battling. I had some little challenge with little technical stuff, but yeah, I'm here now. We're just going to do this make it very short. Let me just apologize to those who have been following me on social media, that is Twitter, Instagram, and of course Facebook. And for those who followed yesterday's broadcast, I did mention that I'll be talking about media advertising today, but my guest couldn't join me because something came up that is unforeseen, not prepared for. That is why he couldn't be part of the broadcast today. I can't talk about media advertising alone. I'm a broadcaster, so I'm not really an expert in all of that. So for that reason, we'll be doing that another day. So today, I'll be talking about the media, investigative journalism, and the sad reality. This is what we'll be talking about in today's broadcast. So just welcome and feel free to be part of the show. Do not forget that you can drop your message. We'll get to display it on the screen. Let me know what you think about some of the things I'll be talking about and factors that I'll be mentioning. So first, let's establish something about what investigative journalism is about. It is, of course, just as the name implies, it's nothing really strange. It's just about revealing the hidden truths, things that are hidden, from the general public, things that the general public that are hidden from the public. So it's just a form of journalism that goes beneath the surface, that goes very deep to talk about topic of interest, reveal hidden facts. It could be about political corruption, it could be about serious crimes, it could be about corporate wrongdoing. So it's just someone that it takes time to really carry out investigative journalism. It's time taking, and of course, you have to do a whole lot of work. So it's not something that you can come up with within a day. So that is basically what investigative journalism is about. It's about revealing hidden facts, hidden truths, secrets that are concealed from the public, things that the public doesn't know that are intentionally hidden. Either it can be about corruption, as I mentioned before, it can be about crime. Right now in this country, we're talking about rape, and rape is trending because not because it's strange to our land, but because we are reporting more about rape. Those who are victims, they are coming out to talk about it, and of course, the media is reporting more on rape. So, investigative journalism can as well cover the activity of rapists, what is happening, and even more beyond that about corporate bodies, what they are doing, and all of the rest. So, it's just about hidden truths, things that are concealed from the public. So that is what investigative journalism is about. So now that we've established what investigative journalism is about, it will be very nice for us to talk also now start talking about the challenges we're facing when it comes to investigative journalism in Nigeria and of course Africa at large. But my focus will be on in Nigeria, the challenges, and talking about the role of the media and everyone. So, the challenges really investigative journalism. One of the things before we can talk about the challenges, we have to establish the fact that broadcasters or journalists can talk about issues, but then there are much little limit to what a journalist can talk about on a particular issue if it doesn't happen to them directly. So the journalists as well depend on the public to carry out information. So for example, I live in Lagos, if something happened in Sokoto, for example, and I want to investigate what is happening in Sokoto, I have to travel all the way out of Lagos and go to Sokoto. For me to get that information, I have to talk to the people. And for the information to be open, the people must be willing to talk back. So investigative journalism, it's not just, it's a two-way communication that has to do with the media, that is the journalist, and of course the people, the public. So the public must be willing to share information or things they know about with journalists for investigations to be done. Otherwise, if that does not happen, what we get to see at the end of the day is that we'll get to find ourselves in a situation where journalists are just working and they are not getting the necessary support that is needed to carry out these functions. So that is one aspect of it. But then again, for the people to really talk to journalists, they must be sure that they can trust the journalist. So one of the things we've seen over the years is that there is this mistrust, where the public doesn't really find it, they are not so confident to talk to journalists anymore because people are scared. It's just the same thing that happens when you talk about reporting to the police. People are scared for one reason or the other. And that is definitely one of the challenges facing investigative journalism. But I'll talk more about this later. But then before I go on to the aspect that has to do with political leadership, let me first of all establish that the owners of media business, most businesses, radio and TV in Nigeria, which will be my core focus, they are not really established for investigative journalism. They are mainly established to make money. Every business, the primary purpose of every business, of course, should be about rendering service. Making money can be core part of it, but I still strongly believe that making money shouldn't come first, especially when it comes to public service. So it should come last. So the first thing should be about, readiness to serve. So what we see now is that we have radios and TV stations opening up not for the purpose of news or investigative journalism. Majority of the radio stations and TV stations you have there, they are just mainly for entertainment, which is not bad. So even in entertainment, you can still practice investigative journalism because there are cases or things happening in entertainment that are hidden at times that the public need to know, the public need to be aware about. So it can have to do with a contract between artists, record label and an artist, and some hidden facts that might be concealed either by the record label or otherwise. So, but regardless, what we have presently at the moment is we have more media houses opening up for business just for the purpose of entertaining the public and not signing up to investigative journalism. Even those who are called news media, talk about radio, TV, they are just there reading the news. They pick news stories from newspapers. Do you understand? So if you notice what I'm doing, I've not mentioned newspaper when I'm talking about investigative journalism, because the truth is that we must give credit to newspaper. Newspaper in Nigeria still remain the only media that is spending so much in investigative journalism. Yes, newspaper, they do so much in investigative journalism, unlike radio and TV. So radio and TV, on the other hand, depend on newspapers to carry out the news. So whatever you hear a news station, for example, whether TV or radio talking about, it is mostly about what they've heard from newspapers, right? That is the information. Those are the things they will report, they'll publish on, and sometimes they grant interviews. So now, because investigative journalism is very expensive, most of the TVs and newspapers in Nigeria are not really ready to spend that much on investigative journalism. So they will rather depend on the newspapers, right? and reports, copy and paste whatever newspaper is doing, talk about it, have panelists come sit down and analyze it. So that analysis is very good. But then, that is not to say I'm not trying to attack radio and TV, but I'm just saying radio and TV are not really investing or spending much into investigative journalism. So now, that aside, we now have to talk about some of the factors, why media houses, TV and news and radio are not really spending much on investigative journalism. Number one of that is what we call censorship. So, censorship and gatekeeping. Now, it's just very similar, but somehow a little different. What I talk censorship is that, you see, newspaper, the only body regulating newspaper in Nigeria is the Newspaper or Proprietary Association. They have their own body. So they are not, they don't depend on any form of license from any government agency, unlike radio and TV. I don't know if you understand. Radio and TV is controlled, is under the control of what we call NBC. NBC. In case you're hearing NBC for the very first time. So now, whenever government, even the military era, takes over, what you see happens most of the time is that they first want to shut down radio and TV stations, right? To announce. They depend on the the TV and radio stations to announce to the public that they have taken over. So that is why you often see that happens a lot of the time in Nigeria during the military era. The reason is this, I'll tell you, is because the people who probably, because of the number of educated people in Nigeria, those who are the number of the literate Nigerians, those who are literate, who can read and write. That is what I'm talking about, literacy. Because the number is not so high. And even those who are literate do not necessarily have the time to go about reading newspapers. So governments pay less attention to newspaper, right? So they focus more on TV stations and radio stations. So this is because TV stations will explain in details, or radio station will explain in detail some of the things that have been reported in newspaper that the people might not understand. So that is why you see that the process of opening a radio station or TV station in Nigeria is very rigorous. You have to it's not apart from getting the license, bro, you go sweat before you get license. So the body that is responsible for licensing or regulating radio and TV in Nigeria is called the NBC. And for those who do not know, the NBC is the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission, or National Broadcasting Commission. That is what the NBC is about, National Broadcasting Commission. So the NBC gives license, can suspend the license of a radio station. They have that power to suspend the license of any radio station and any TV station. So now, and some of the things that are listed in the broadcasting code as violation is number one, reporting. Reporting what they will say on news that can incite the public. I don't know if you understand. Reporting on news that are considered very insightful, things that can make the public rise and become aware of things happening within their environment. And such story is, for example, imagine a radio station analyzing corruption against President Muhammadu Buhari. Just imagine. Imagine if a radio station does investigative reporting and discover that our president is involved in, is hand deep into corruption, and they decide to talk about this on radio, broadcasting it in Hausa, Yoruba, Igbo, English, Pidgin, and even on TV. Imagine the awareness that will happen to the public. So when they talk about insightful things, it is not clearly defined. Insightful broadcast or reporting It's anything that gets to affect the public relation and trust in government. So if you remember what happened when President Muhammadu Buhari took over, you remember one of the statements reportedly mentioned or credited to Lai Mohammed is the fact that the media are against the government. I don't know if you can recall that, when Lai Mohammed reportedly said that the media are against us, the media are not supporting us, and there were several meetings and everything. And then you recall, the very first thing that happened, that AIT was shot out of the Aso Rock. Remember that story? It is because of some of the reports, not necessarily because you are against the government, but because what we've seen over the years is that governments in Nigeria, even before Buhari government, so do not misunderstand me. I'm not saying this is peculiar to Buhari government. Every government before now. So what governments have done, and they have always doing, is to censor the media. So this censorship doesn't always happen to newspaper, but it mostly happens to radio and TV stations. So now, you see the difference. The NBC can withdraw your license, and when the NBC suspend the license of a radio station, you cannot broadcast. Do you understand? Or a TV station. So you go off air for whatever reason it is. That is not the case with a newspaper, right? So the worst you will see for a newspaper is, I don't know if you can recall earlier this year, last year, right? Before the 2019 election, when Daily Trust newspaper, their office in Maiduguri, Borno office, was invaded by military men because of a report they did. I can't really bring up some of those graphics, but if you want to, in case you've forgotten, just browse it up. When Daily Trust and several other newspaper houses that have been invaded by military men or the police or agencies of government, or government rather. Now, see the difference. You hardly see the military men invading radio houses or TV stations, because the government have an agency that can censor what is going on TV and radio. Do you understand me? So what happens therefore is that they will just seize your license. You can't broadcast anymore. So, but unlike newspaper, they can't stop the newspapers from printing. So what they go is that they storm the newspaper office, destroy every of their machines, intimidate their staff, make arrests, and lock them up. The same thing happened with Agba Jalingo. You know, Agba Jalingo is not a broadcaster. He's a journalist that reports for print media, right? In Calabar, Cross River State. So that is the censorship. Apart from censorship, we talk about another thing, intimidation. Now, intimidation is in the sense that if I report this story, what happens to me? You'll be arrested, you'll be locked up, you'll be kept away from the public. And over time, you discover that this has caused a fear factor in every journalist. Because what happens? You are a family man, you get locked up, kept away from your family, your employer will stop paying, you don't make any money once that happens. They'll deny you in some cases. That is if they just want to play, they want to separate their business from you. They deny you and say, oh, government, take this person, I do this report. We don't know him. We not send out this message. We didn't know he used that medium to do this. So once that happens, you get locked up. So the young generation of broadcasters or journalists who are coming up will have that fear factor. And nobody wants to cross the line anymore. So this is where you now see the fear factor now setting. Everyone is scared. Oh, should I talk about this? You even see a situation where a radio station or a media house, upon getting a report that can indict a government, will write to the government and say, this is what we have. Should we go ahead to publish this? Do you understand? That is the factor, and that is why investigative journalism is not so much of a thing in Nigeria. Journalists who practice investigative journalism will be applauded. The public will praise them. You are doing the right job. You are doing the right thing. But do you know what happens to them at the end of the day? They go hungry. Their family will suffer for it because there is no security. There is no trust. There is no guarantee. You don't even have a business to run. So now we are talking about government. Imagine you investigating as a journalist A multinational, for example, I don't want to call any business, so may not be like say, they try to say maybe that they do one routine. But what I'm saying is that imagine having a story about a big multinational, a big company in Nigeria, and you want to publish that story, or you want to share that story with the public. They either buy your station to kill that story and make it not happen, or they come after you as a journalist, they fit kill you, poison you for where you dey relax, assassinate you, and all of the rest. So this is a global phenomenon, not just Nigeria alone. It happens all over the world, where journalists are being intimidated every day. To date, we still have a journalist that works with Al Jazeera who has been locked up for the past 6 years in Egypt. He's still there. There's nothing Al Jazeera could do. Al Jazeera would only report that we still have this journalist. At the time, the consumption of news is like it's like life. It's a very serious business, right? So news becomes stale at a time. There are really little you can do about a news story if you cannot develop it. So the public get tired of that story and they want to move away. It's the same thing that happened with your coronavirus thing. At the point, people are tired. You turn your TV or radio, you are hearing coronavirus. They needed distraction. So when the death of George Floyd happened in the US, you see how all the media houses tune away from coronavirus. Nobody talked about coronavirus anymore. Nobody talked about the protection. It's the same way that even though your employer are not in support of your incarceration, they cannot continue on daily basis to inform the public that you are still in jail, that you've been locked up by the government. They want to talk about other things, and gradually they'll move on from that story, not intentionally, but because news is demand. The fresher the news, the fresher the gist, the more subscription and followership you get. And that is what is affecting investigative journalism all over the world. Particularly in Nigeria, it is another factor is because it's very expensive to run investigative journalism. For example, if I need information about what is going on in, let's say, the Ministry for Humanitarian Development and Human Disaster, the ministry that is responsible for this school feeding program, and of course what's it called again? Empower, market money and the disbursement of fund, conditional cash transfer and all of the rest. Imagine if I want to get information about the spending in that ministry. I need somebody in the ministry to share some documents and informations with me. So what will happen is that I have to, in some cases, I have to pay. I have to bribe these people. I have to put them on payroll to say, Oga, see how much. Take how much you want to sell this information. Because even information now for sale. So you see, it is not chic to practice investigative journalism. You have to pay at times. Especially when it comes to exposing corruption in high places. Think about exposing corruption in the police force. So the only way we can move any country forward, that any nation can develop, is if there is investigative journalism is well established. And for that to be done, it means that there must be huge guarantee coming from the media houses. The media owners must understand that this is what we want to do. We don't care if we are not going to make money, but who would not care? How do you get his support? So you must have sources of income. You get me now? So if, for example, you look at the story that is going on about Obasa, Lagos State House of Assembly, received invoices being exposed by Sahara Reporter. I applaud Sahara Reporter for what they are doing. But I can tell you that did not happen without an insider. Now somebody, a politician who wants Obasa out of the way, now they expose some of these things. So in talking about exposing corruption in high places, it cannot be done if you do not. It's always easy in Africa when politicians they fight, so they go easily they throw informations about But when they are together and you want to expose their activity, that is where the danger comes in. So if you look at it, you discover that collectively, number one, it has to do with public trust. If the public, everyone dey scared now say, I wan tell you say for my office, that they do this mago for my office. You be scared, you think about it, okay, how do I let this information out and it won't come back to me? Because as journalists, we are protected by law not to expose our source. So if I find out more information tomorrow, I'm not supposed to expose my source. But you know, say for Nigeria or developing country, if they torture you as a journalist to the point say you wan die, you fit start to dey talk, dey call name. You see where you. So it's not always a fair game, because those who you are investigating will do everything at all costs to stop your investigation and make it useless before the public. You know, they'll fight, they'll come after you and all of these things. So at the end of the day, now the same reason why Nigeria never develop, why we not fit go out, go protest, now the same thing they affect investigative journalism. And until we get it right, that part of journalism, we cannot really expose corruption and we cannot really achieve the needed development in Nigeria. As it is, I mentioned before, we never still know how well they spend COVID-19 money, all of the several donations and everything, right? But the only way we can get this information, if journalists go fit investigate. But how do you investigate? You need somebody in-house to share information with you. Those way they say that they go buy one thing, or we buy toilet tissue. Those who have the invoice that can say, this thing at 5 naira is supposed to cost you, but we invoiced it out for 50 million. You see? So all of these things are the factors. And I hope I don't make some sense today on 30 minutes with me, Twitwi. Just think about it. Next time you think about the challenges we are facing in Nigeria, think about investigative journalism as one of the challenges. And the way to solve this is the same approach to solving every problem in Nigeria. We must be willing to make that sacrifice. Thank you very much for listening to me again. And this is where I want to say we've come to the end of the program. Tomorrow again, but tomorrow is going to be a 1 hour stretch, because we'll be talking about the mind of a rapist. What is going on the mind of a rapist before they commit rape, what they are thinking about, why they are doing it, and even after they have committed the act. So I will have a psychiatrist that will be joining me, a psychologist, and a sociologist. Yeah, 3. So we'll segment it into 20 minutes each and have a awesome conversation for 1 hour from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. So make it a date if you want to know what they go on for the mind of a rapist. And also we'll touch on the psychological effects on victims of rape. So thank you. Till tomorrow again, we'll do this again. My name is Twitwi Ayenowowon. So do have a wonderful day. Bye.